A very good morning, folks. It's a delight to be at this event. This is one of a series of events that the Improvement Service is working with councils on to kind of promote sharing of practice, sharing of experience around Scotland. If you're a junkie for events of this sort, can I advertise 2 forthcoming ones? If you're into getting a market listing for your council and you want to issue bonds, I can recommend going to Aberdeen in January and you can learn all about it from what Aberdeen has done in that respect. And if you're interested in how we engage volunteers in public services, I can recommend Helensburgh in March with Argyll and Bute Council. So there are forthcoming events, but today I think is a really important event about how not only do we form partnerships across the public service around communities, but how we form partnerships with communities themselves. And these are not always and have not always been the same thing. As I was driving down today, I realised I have not been in Saltcoats for 35 years, so I apologise for my lack of contribution to the tourism flow in North Ayrshire. And the last time I was down, I was a young academic doing a bit of work for the then Strathclyde Regional Council on why policies and practices to deal with drug addicts in the 3 towns weren't working. And the conclusions of that research are probably interestingly prescient with respect to today. One of the things we concluded was you have to have fabulous planning and management skills to lead a chaotic lifestyle. And treating chaotic people as if they were just chaotic completely misses the point. These were people of enormous insight, skills and capacities. Secondly, they have very powerful networks. So people who have drug addiction share a lot with each other. How do you engage with the welfare and benefit system? How do you engage with housing? Where can you get food on a Thursday around the 3 towns? And so on. And knowledge management was going on apace. And our third conclusion was the desire of Strathclyde Regional Council to do outcomes to these people was why it didn't work. And then the only way this was going to work is if we respected where they started from and worked with them in their networks in quite different ways. So an interesting example from the past, oddly, that just came into my head as I was driving down this morning, of why this theme about how we build strong communities, but we recognise communities of interest and communities of practice as well as communities of place and how we do that. As I walked in today, I must say I saw the most spectacular example of co-design and co-production. I strongly recommend you all the Saffron restaurant, which is bang opposite the front door of this building. You can get a 3-course lunch for $4.95, but in a co-productive spirit it says, and feel free to bring your own alcohol. So it's a very Scottish approach to how we should be having lunch. I've been asked to say a bit about how the national framework has evolved over time. And I'll be fairly brief on some elements of this. Clearly, the foundation document of much policy thinking we're still doing just now and trying to tease out was the Christie Commission. And the Christie Commission's messages were in one sense, I think, absolutely evident. And indeed, the Commission itself said that all of its conclusions came from observing what people were doing across Scotland. So it wasn't that they sat down with a blank sheet of paper and thought deep thoughts. It was they took a lot of evidence and engaged with a lot of people about how we should go forward. But at the heart of it was the so-called outcome focus. That there is always a danger if you're running large-scale public services that the simple practicalities of having to run the service become what you're focused on, and we lose sight that the whole point of this is to improve people's lives and opportunities. And that therefore we needed to constantly as public services remind ourselves of why we exist and not just how we exist, and make sure that what's practical for us wasn't grossly impractical for the people we were serving. A big emphasis in Christie on the continuing inequalities there are in Scottish society, and linking that, I think, usefully to the patterns of demand we face. That things we could have prevented had we worked differently with people and improved the outcomes of their lives, we end up fielding through the police service, through emergency admissions to hospital and so on, and therefore, in a way, intervening well downstream before these things was important, and that led to the third emphasis of prevention and early intervention. For Christie, a lot of that was about how we worked with place and community. That if we could not engage with place and community, we could not get in and prevent and intervene early. And indeed, how we design places where people will live is the earliest intervention we make in their lives. People are born into places. What that place is like sets opportunities for them, challenges for them, and so on. The public services, if they're focused on outcomes, would instantly recognise we all need to work together as public services. No one service creates health, no one service creates safety, no one service creates people who learn, grow and develop in their lives. It takes all of our public services working together. And a big emphasis on organising our public services around people in place, rather than forcing people to work their way around the way we've bothered organising our public services. So simplifying and getting to the kind of locality-based partnerships we'll talk about across today as a key element of the Christian tradition. And the final thing was almost what we concluded if we go drugs problems and Saltcoats 35 years ago, which is we have to work with people to work better for them. That if we keep on trying to do things to people, it doesn't work. We have to respect them as partners in how we improve and change outcomes in their lives. That led to a statement of ambition from national and local government in Scotland together, and again, many of you will be familiar with this, a statement about the role of public services. That must was underlined in that first bullet point. That the reason public services exist is to improve outcomes and opportunities for people, and therefore it is imperative that that happens and that we commit to that, and to reduce the outcome gap between populations and between areas. That total resources should be targeted to deliver that. And that was an interesting proposition, that even when we do partner, often the thing that's hardest to do is to get to joint resourcing. We can have joint policies, joint strategies, joint thises and joint thats, but when it comes to actually pooling our resources together and deploying them collectively, that's more of a challenge. But if we mean what we say about improving outcomes, then we have to get partnerships that truly drive resources behind our shared priorities. The promotion of prevention and early intervention. And I'll come back to that, sorry. Okay, there you are, my care assistant has come up on stage and sorted it out. I'm deeply grateful, Chris, thank you. I'll come back to that because clearly there's a local dimension to prevention and early intervention, but there also, of course, there's national policy dimensions as well. Are we creating the context in which local preventative work is more possible and more successful? And finally, and I think if I wanted a t-shirt spoken out of the Christie Commission, it would be that last bullet point, that we need to make demonstrable improvements in people's lives. All the rest of it is waffle if that isn't what we're focused on. So that bit, really important. And that's resulted in what is quite quick in policy time. Policy time is kind of glacial and geological, but what's quite quick in policy time is we actually got to an act in 2015, the Community Empowerment Scotland Act, and that places a duty in law for the first time on all public service partners to improve outcomes. Up until then, we've all had duties to make arrangements for the delivery of service and so on. We did not have a duty in law to actually improve people's outcomes. Well, we now do. So the law exposes us to an accountability now. Is the way we're working together actually improving outcomes for the populations that we serve? To do that, we should have a local outcome improvement plan, and that should be for the whole area. And Neil, I think, has spoken eloquently about some of the challenges, but opportunities within North Ayrshire as a whole economy and a whole area. But we should have specific plans for communities and places whose outcomes are poorer than the norm for our area. So there's a targeting dimension for this. If some communities' outcomes are poor in comparison to others, we need to have specific plans as to how we will actually improve their outcomes over time. We've got the first draft batch of LOIPs, so-called local outcome improvement plans, and these are being reviewed and discussed just now around councils. But we should see that as an evolutionary thing. You don't do a local outcome improvement plan and stick it in the shelf. We're going to have to keep on reviewing it, including with the communities we serve, to make sure we are indeed getting it right from their point of view as well. All partners have a duty to build that shared local outcome improvement plan into their corporate planning. So we can't say, well, that was really nice and we'd love to do it, but we've got other much more important things to do. If you sign off on a local outcome improvement plan, you have signed off that you intend to build it in to your own organisational planning and corporate planning and financial planning as an organisation. And finally, and I think this is important as well, a duty to resource and support community participation. That means we need to get this right, not just get it somewhere to that allows us to tick a box. And some communities may require significantly more resourcing to be able to be confident and to get the vehicles for participation that they need. So, quite an important act, and almost what it does is take Christie and turn it into legislation and set a framework for the future. 2 points I'd make. If you look at the whole transition from Christie through to the Act, there is a tendency to talk about community and place as if they were the same things. But place is a spatial and physical dimension that I think we've often neglected in community planning. It's all been about how do we get services together and so on. Actually, it's also about the physical context in which people live. And have we got that right? Does the planning system work to get that right? And indeed, if you look at what we know about what changes outcomes over time, one of the interesting, well-demonstrated observations is the biggest improvements in the lives of people in Scotland and the UK occurred before we had a universal education system, a universal national health service. They occurred through better planning, better housing and significant investment in housing infrastructure, investment in regulation, and regulation has proven to be really important, even though we now regard it as kind of boring and red tape. Regulation has proven to be stunningly important. This co-production. Is that better? Sorry, I beg your pardon, folks. Before we had the things we now spend most of our money on in Scotland as public services, we were doing things that really did transform people's lives and well-being. Water and sewerage systems, the environmental health side of the house, had a bigger impact on the Scottish population's life expectancy than the National Health Service has. So, in doing this, we need to think not just about the big public services, but also about the infrastructure, the role of regulation, the role of planning in creating contexts in which people can live well and thrive. We do know that some areas and some communities experience systematically worse outcomes than others. And that means we need to think about how we engage, but we do also need to be challenging about why these communities come to have worse lives and greater difficulties. One of the paradoxes just now is we are passionately committed across Scotland to working differently with communities and so on. At the same time, some of our most disadvantaged communities are becoming further impoverished by welfare reform at UK national level. So exactly what we're trying to do at local level is being systematically made more difficult or completely undermined at national level. So again, there's a bit about the whole system, not just the local part of the system and how it works. What we're clear about is that just public services in isolation don't change people's lives. It's the engagement with them about the opportunities in their lives that matters. 3 other elements I want to emphasise because they've become apparent recently. We've just got an update of the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. The fascinating thing is it's now finding that 58% of the most deprived households in Scotland do not live in the 20% most deprived areas in Scotland. In other words, deprived households are now much more diffuse, and many households who are not in deprived areas as we would perceive it. That means our strategies need to be subtle. So we pick up on and support households experiencing deprivation as well as areas and communities experiencing deprivation. We also probably have to ask questions about the area link and the household link. Why do some households end up in the areas they do? And what aspects of housing planning and housing policy have resulted in that over time? We've also got good evidence of significant turnover in the most deprived areas in Scotland. People move out, others move in, so they're not the same communities over time. These are mobile, flexible and changing communities. I think sometimes we think about them far too statically. And finally, all of our evidence is the macroeconomic, the fiscal framework and the welfare framework really matter. Yes, we can do huge things locally by working differently, but we need to do it in a context that's supportive of achieving those things for people. So we've got ourselves to a focus on people in place. If there's a slogan, it's about community around, and we need to get that right. A lot of emphasis on asset-based approaches that recognise that these communities are not passive dumplings who can't do anything for themselves. There are people who are often surviving under really arduous and difficult circumstances with great skill and sophistication. How do we engage that skill and sophistication in taking this agenda forward? But we also, I think, need to link up the physical, the economic and the social planning that we're doing. And that probably, as an observation, has almost been parallel tracks over time that bother me. With one track that started with Christie and that I've rehearsed with you, the Statement of Ambition, the Community Empowerment Scotland Act, the Local Outcome Improvement Plans. We've another that's now talked about in terms of inclusive growth, but has included the Enterprise and Skills Review that's recently happened, the Planning Review, and we're now talking through the Planning Review about place plans, where communities can develop their own plan for place. We've got the place standard that people are working to and will be discussed today. But it's almost as if the physical and spatial planning has gone down one track and the community planning has gone down the other track. That makes absolutely no sense at all. The planning consents we're giving to new housing developments today will determine the opportunities for communities 20 years from now. If we cock it up, we will reap the consequences of that. And looking across my own neck of the woods, which is North Lanarkshire, there are huge housing areas being constructed without any community infrastructure at all. We feel grateful if developers will cough up to help us support the roads in an area. Why aren't they coughing up to provide community development workers so the things they built become viable and thriving communities as they go along? So we are potentially creating many disasters for the future if we don't think that spatial planning and community planning comes together. All of this is important if you think of the future challenges we face. With massive demographic pressures in Scotland. Elma was making the point about the availability of jobs and job density in North Ayrshire. Some of that will be self-healing to the extent the working age population of North Ayrshire is going to decline very sharply across the next 20 years. So to some extent, jobs and population may come into balance over time. There are other parts of Scotland where there's going to be an absolutely chronic imbalance between a very small working age population and a very large elderly population. We've got the economic and fiscal constraints we know about, and partly underlying them are issues about productivity and the skill set that Scottish and British people have, but also how work is organised, the rights that workers have and so on. We need to get that bit right as part of planning for communities, because communities are economic communities as well as social communities. We need to deal with digital, and again, are we anywhere near as far on as we should be in terms of digital empowerment? Are excluded communities able to make full use. We've got fantastically high smartphone penetration in Scotland. Even in the most disadvantaged communities, it's about 90+%. These are not digitally illiterate people, but are we playing to that strength and regarding it as an asset that enables economic and social activity to occur? And finally, terrifyingly, Brexit, because it will cut across all the above. If you look at assumptions about Scotland's ageing population, with immigration carrying on as it is just now, and with immigration stopped, it is truly terrifying what happens to Scotland if immigration is stopped. The fertile part of our population has largely come here from elsewhere, it's immigrant. The non-fertile population are the boring old sods like myself who are not going to reproduce again. We're in trouble unless we can maintain a flow of younger people into this country and those younger people have children. So getting place right, I think, is central to how we address that whole agenda. We tend to think that's for government. No, it's not. It's for how Saltcoats is going to be. How Saltcoats is going to be as a place where people can age decently and well. How Saltcoats is going to engage with digital and what opportunities for Saltcoats can we get out of digital. How do we make sure there's an economy around the three towns that sustain the levels of population we'll need to give caring communities to the older people who'll be in the three towns over time. So huge challenges, but they're not ones that someone up there can sort. They're ones we are going to have to sort out through how we work with it. The national could make life easier or more difficult, but how outcomes happen is going to be very much down to how we do this across Scotland. So what I'm suggesting, and I'll end in this, is we need, in our sense of place, to get joined up across all of our thinking. We need to think about the role of planning, regeneration, infrastructure. I ask people across the room and friends from Antrim, when you look at your planning function, how many bungalows have you managed to achieve across the last decade? We're an ageing society, we need bungalows, they're like hen's teeth just now. How many developers have we managed to talk in to building housing that makes any sense at all for the ageing population we're becoming? If we don't, we know older people will rattle around in housing that's inappropriate for them, have more falls, spend more time of their old age in hospital, and that will cost a huge sum of money. Why aren't we getting that core infrastructure for living decently as you age right through our planning, regeneration and infrastructure system? We need our economic planning to support the communities who are experiencing disadvantage. We've just done a bit of work across 32 councils in Scotland about who is it you employ and where do you employ them for, given we're saying we want to see more jobs, better opportunities for people from deprived communities. I'd have to say on average, the public sector is no better than the private sector in its penetration into deprived communities and creating employment. And indeed, for most councils, all of the highest paid jobs go to people who are coming from outside the area and who don't live within the area at all. So we need to think about our economic muscle as public authorities apart from anything else, and are we using it well to support the communities we most want to support? We need to work with communities to build capacity, but that means recognising the capacity exists and respecting it, rather than going in to do something to them. Public services matter, but my feel is you need to get the first three right first before customised and targeted public services have the impact they ought to have. So in one sense we need to reverse our sense of priorities just now in Scotland. It's been all about education, care and health, and that's where all the budget goes. We need to start to think actually some of the key levers are not there at all, and we need to have a much more holistic and integrated approach to the communities we serve. There's a Cook's tour of where we are. Much of it's incoherent until you make it coherent at national level, so at local levels. I'll leave you just with three thoughts. The future context is challenging, and I think the biggest challenge is how do we maintain a bottom-up focus in what's a very top-down world. If you think
that the budgets for public services and SOL codes will be more determined by what Philip Hammond says on the 23rd of this month than they will be by any decision taken in North Ayrshire at all. It shows you what a top-down world we live in the UK. But the challenge, I think, to those who are committed to local communities is managing the contradictions of that to work creatively and well, to allow the community in, be honest about the challenges and contradictions that that poses. We need to integrate our spatial and economic and community planning, or I think we lose place altogether. We end up with a sort of very dilute sense of place. Places are economic and physical just as much as they're communal, and we need to get that bit joined up as we go forward. I hope today is a chance to get beyond my witterings and into the real insights that people working at local level have. So thank you very much.